thank you for handing over. Welcome to everybody joining in today's webinar session, which is organized by the FAIR Impact Project and addresses the topic of, well, progressing in a fair way. My name is Jörg Suhre-Vetter. I'm the director of the National Research Data Infrastructure, which is a large-scale initiative in Germany dedicated towards the vision to provide fair access to research data in a sustainable way. And in fact, the topics we are addressing today all are centered around this topic. Probably you all are aware of what FAIR is. I have used this term now, but just for your reference, it's to provide a better access to data according to the so-called FAIR principles, which makes data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Some also say R stands also for reproducible, but actually the reproducible is something which you do when you analyze data and produce experiments, and the experiments are reproducible. But anyway, this all is a means to achieve better science. So the ultimate goal of having fair data is to have a to have better and faster research results so we can progress in all these challenges that we're actually facing. Now, the endeavor to provide data in such a way has seen the kickoff of many initiatives over the past years. And today we will revisit some of the initiatives and show what progress has been achieved. And actually, we are growing more and more together in this space. We are talking about so-called data spaces, and those are technical infrastructures accompanied by processes and organizations which organize such data access. And our aim is, well, to provide the competence to make these data spaces fair, because this is not a pre-given. There can be data spaces where data is hosted in an unfair way, you could say. But this is not what we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is the ultimate goal to have much better access in these data spaces. And there are many data spaces currently being discussed, be it in the culture domain, be it in the mobility domain, the energy domain, and even, I think it's at least 11 or 12 data spaces that are now on the way. In Germany, the NFDI is one large provider, and as part of the NFDI, we are partner of the so-called FAIR Dataspaces project, which brings together this FAIR and Dataspaces, and we will show you what has been happening there. Also, we will take a glimpse on the so-called Base for NFDI project, which is a project that is establishing fundamental base services like identity management and PID services. But of course, we are not doing this just on a national level, and that's why we are here today. The FAIR Impact Project is a project dedicated in, well, achieving impact in this area on the European level. The project title is chosen quite well. And today's roadshow is dedicated towards you, the audience, to see how such national initiatives actually hook into European initiatives. And therefore, we also have a number of presentations from people coming, for example, from the FAIR Core for EOSC project, which is quite similar to Base for NFDI, but on the European level. We, of course, have also people from the FAIR Impact Project itself that show how various European partners work towards this goal. And you might say, well, isn't this too much attention? I don't have the feeling, because we have to create an impact in all scientific disciplines, right? It's from the nature sciences to the life sciences to the social sciences to the engineering sciences. And this is a big endeavor, actually. So I think it's quite well addressed at the moment that so many people and initiatives are working towards it. But we have to come to the common goal, and we have to find a way how we can link these initiatives together. And that's the purpose of today's meeting, to give you a platform to understand what is happening, to ask questions, and maybe after the event, get in touch with people here and start collaborating. So thank you very much for joining. I'm very happy to open up the session, and I'm glad that you are joining. Please feel free to ask questions. I would like to ask you to collect your questions and then do the questioning in the discussions after each presentation. Now, I think I have enough said as for today for the introduction, and it is a great pleasure to hand over to Ingrid Dillo from Dance, who is the project coordinator of the FAIR Impact Project. Ingrid, please.
Thank you very much, Jörg, and thank you very much for that nice introduction. So let me start by saying that I'm really very excited that we have been able to organize this roadshow together with NFDI as the local host. This is the third roadshow of FAIR Impact. We already visited Serbia and Slovenia, and we will, of course, continue our virtual and even in some cases physical tour across Europe in the coming months. But I think this German edition is special, not only because we are lucky to have Jörg, by the way, as the chair of our advisory committee of the project, but also because of the vision of NFDI that defines data as a common good for excellent research. Because that means, among other things, that relevant data should be made available according to the FAIR principles. You already spoke about that, and that is also what is in our acronym. So there we have a big touching point. But you also work together within NFDI across domains, which is also a characteristic of FAIR Impact. And you are involved in defining and setting up data spaces, as you said, which is also part of the work that we're doing. So in that sense, I think this roadshow provides an excellent opportunity to get to know each other even better and to exchange ideas and to see whether we can continue our collaboration in certain areas. So first, to kick this off, a little bit about the FAIR Impact Project. I'm not going to give you a complete overview because I think that that is the most boring part probably of this meeting. But for those of you who don't know anything about the project, this might be helpful as a little introduction. So FAIR Impact is an EU-funded project with a budget of 10 million euro, and we work together with 28 partners from all parts of Europe. It's a 3-year project, and we are now halfway. And the project is really focused on coordination and support. So in that sense, it's also quite different from FAIR Core for EOSC, which really develops technical components. So there is a big difference. FAIR Impact supports the implementation of FAIR enabling practices and tools and policies, technical specifications, etc., etc. And we try to do that, as you can see on this slide, across scientific communities. So we try to transfer and adapt solutions from one domain to other domains. And we also work across research outputs. So we're not only looking at data, but we also work on research software and semantic artifacts. And finally, we aim to have an impact on different levels, not only the European, but also the national and the institutional level. So also from that perspective, we're very happy to be in Germany today. So that is our overall objective, but how do we try to achieve that? Well, we try to engage, of course, with a wide range of stakeholders, and we try to develop multiple coordination and support mechanisms to bring this about. And amongst these stakeholders, we have the national and the European research performing organizations, but also very much the service providers and the repositories. So this project is not directly aimed at researchers, but through those institutions, of course, we hope to have an effect on the researchers. Together with domain-specific partners, we try to identify current but also emerging FAIR enabling components. And these, again, can be all kinds of things. They can be technical specs, but also very much policies and practices. And we try to translate them through to other domains, also to other outputs, from one type of output to the other. And we also, a very important element, we also support the application and the implementation in these other fields, which also really relates to this element of a focus on coordination and support. Here you see an overview of the different work packages and the organizations that lead those work packages. What this really also shows is that we focus on a couple of specific domains: persistent identifiers, metadata and ontologies, so the semantic artifacts, metric certification and guidelines. You can also see on this slide that we have a more horizontal work package that deals with the engagement, adoption, and implementation aspects. And we have a work package on interoperability, which not only looks at the semantic and the technical interoperability, which is also reflected in those 3 pillars you see here, of course, but also looks at the organizational and legal interoperability. Now, of course, the question might arise amongst you whether we still need such a big effort to ensure that the data in European repositories are fair and that researchers follow fair aligned practices. And I think Jörg also already alluded to that. I want to show you 2 graphs that come from a relatively recent European survey amongst 15,000 researchers in Europe. And that shows you a little bit where we stand at the moment. These researchers were asked how aware they are of FAIR. And as you can see on this slide, 2/3 said that they had some level of familiarity, but still 1/3 of those researchers had never heard of them. And only 1 out of 5 said that they really put them into practice. So this shows that there is a will to win. Although you could perhaps also argue that it's not such a problem that people don't know that acronym as long as they use FAIR aligned practices without maybe being aware that that is part of this FAIR acronym. Well, that was a question that was also asked. And I think this overview is quite telling. Here you can see, for example, that when researchers were asked whether they always release data sets with a license, only, 17% answered that they always do that. Also, acquiring persistent identifiers for data sets, only 19% said that they always do that. So this really shows you that in those practices, there is a will to win. And of course, repositories can play an important role there, because if they attach a persistent identifier to a data set in their repository, then the researcher is covered. So both for those organizations as well as for the researchers themselves, I think we are not there yet. And projects like ours and initiatives like NFDI can play an important role there, I think. So going back to the project, in FAIR Impact, we also work, like I said, with domain-specific partners on a number of in-depth use cases. And these focus around 4 scientific domains, as you can see here: the social sciences and humanities, the photon and neutron sciences, life sciences, and the agri-food sector. And this slide also shows you the partners and the specific topics that we work on, which I won't further mention here. You can look that up if you want. Of course, in this project, we need to realize a wide uptake of FAIR solutions by our key stakeholders, so we can't limit it to the use cases that we have inside of the project. So we also provide a huge support program that has 2 different routes. The first route provides in-kind support for organizations to really self-assess their current capabilities when it comes to FAIR, and to develop FAIR implementation plans. That is the first route of our support program. The second route combines in-kind support with financial support. And that is meant for organizations who really want to implement specific tools or methods or technical specifications. So all in all, we have €500,000 available for those cascading grants. So that is quite a sizable amount of funding, and we hope to reach out to a wide group of institutions in Europe. And next and third call will open at the end of this month on the 31st of January, which will be focused on that second route of in-kind support combined with grants. So anyone who's interested, keep an eye out on our website for that possibility. And finally, if you want to know more about the project, you can find the recordings currently of a community event that we organized on the 16th, which was, I think, a very nice event in which we not only showed what we're doing in the project, but where we also invited applicants from our support program and FAIR champions to reflect on the work and the different topics that we deal with. And at this point in time, I said we are halfway down the 3 years that we have in this project, we already have a lot of deliverables available on our website. And we also have a dedicated community area on Zenodo where you can already find over 60 project results. So anyone who's interested, have a look there. And I think with this, I will hand over to our chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ingrid, for giving a great overview on the FAIR Impact project and spreading out the first links towards the activities that we will now go in depth or more in depth. And before continuing, I'd like to share a little story. And this dates back to the year of 2010. So that's almost 14 years now ago. And that was the time when we started a so-called data registry. And people from GESIS will remember, and Ingrid might also remember about this. This was when suddenly we started to say, we have to attach PIDs, persistent identifiers, to data sets. And when we started to engage the social science community with that idea, the first reactions were more or less ignorance, or why would you do so? And this is a technical concept. This doesn't support our research. And I had a long discussion with a very well-known social scientist, Gerhard Wagner. He's very well known in the German, but also in the international community. And he was like, well, if you as an infrastructure provider put now these numbers to my data sets, I don't want that. And I asked him, so Mr. Wagner, why don't you want this? Well, you will get all the credit for what is being done with the data sets. And I said, no, this is exactly, you're addressing the most important point, but you have the different, but it's not true what you expect, what will happen. The contrary is true. By assigning PIDs to the data sets, you make them referenceable. So you have a unique way of identifying data sets. And by that, of course, you can make experiments reproducible. And by attaching also a metadata schema to the PIDs, you can cite them as if you would do for a publication. So in future reference lists of publications, there will be publications along with data sets. And then I could see his thinking started over, and it was more or less a public discussion. So I can quote from that. And then he suddenly said, okay, but the metadata, there my team and I will be named as authors of the data. And I said, yes, of course, because you are the authors of the data. And we as an infrastructure provider, we are invisible. We just take care that all the infrastructure is in place so that your data can be cited properly. And whenever it is cited, people will find your data set and they will work with the data set and produce more such citations. And then it made click, and he became one of the strongest supporters of the whole idea. Now that is 13 years ago, and so the data registry now has seen a lot of registrations in the meantime, and numbers kept rising over the past years, but still not all data sets are being referenceable, and not all of them are attached, or not all of them have attached PIDs to them. So there's a long way to go. We already went a quite long way, but there's still a way to go. And this is just a little story to get you in the spirit of what we are talking about today. Now it's my great pleasure to hand over to Hanna Maria Höfler from the ZBW in German, which is also a large infrastructure provider in the Leibniz Society. And they are a very strong advocate of open science. And in fact, Anna Maria is coordinating the scientific activities in the area of FAIR, EOSC, and the like. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Please, Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Jörg. I'll share my screen, and I hope it works as planned before. So, okay, so you should see it now in the presentation mode. Is that correct? Okay, I see thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so hello everybody. Good afternoon from my side. I'd like to tell you something in the next 10 or 15 minutes about EOSC in Germany. And I'd like to start with an assumption and an invitation. So the assumption is that EOSC seems to attract great interest in Germany. We have 3 so-called EOSC coffee lectures coming up. And they have specific, each of them has a specific focus. So one is about what is the EOSC and the objectives behind. The second one is about the status quo in the EOSC and which are the future perspectives. And the third one is about the possibilities for participation. And one is very soon, by the end of January, then end of February, end of March. And as you can see in the center of the slide, you can see the registered participants so far. And there seems a high need for information in Germany, in the scientific community, to get to know more about what is going on in the EOSC. And if you'd like to join yourself, and this is the invitation now, please feel free to register. It's every session is like 1 hour. It's in German language and it's for free. So please join. Klaus Tochtermann will give those lectures and will tell you more about the EOSC in more detail. Okay, in Germany in general, the activities with respect to the EOSC are very closely linked to the NFDI, so to the National Research Data Infrastructure. And as you might know, the NFDI has a total budget of 900 million euros for 10 years and more than 290 members from within member organizations from within the German science system. So a very good proportion of organizations are represented and actively involved in the NFDI. And within the NFDI, there are 26 consortia covering diverse scientific disciplines, and one so-called union of consortia based for NFDI. Base for NFDI, as it has been said already, provides or is going to provide basic services for the NFDI. I'll come back to that later. And one important task of NFDI is also to contribute to international developments such as the EOSC. And in this role, NFDI is a mandated organization for Germany in the EOSC Association. That means NFDI, of course, has voting rights, but it also is responsible to represent Germany's national interests in the association. What I'd like to say with that is that EOSC, with respect to EOSC, NFDI plays a very, very important role in Germany. And the scientific community is strongly involved in those NFDI consortia. With respect to EOSC, there is regular exchange in Germany at different levels, and there are some instruments of exchange I'd like to tell you about. The first one is called, we translated it as EU Development Committee. In German, it's called Ausschuss für EU-Entwicklungen, of the German Council for Scientific Information Infrastructures, the RFII, for those of you who know it. And participants in this development committee are members of the council. They meet approximately 3 times a year. There are reports that are being produced afterwards, and occasionally external parties are involved or external persons are involved. For instance, Klaus Tochtermann was involved as a guest with respect to EOSC. But this development committee is not exclusively set up for EOSC matters, but for EU matters in general. So it's also about high performance computing in the EU. It's about the information infrastructure landscape in the EU. There has been a landscape analysis where Germany has been compared to other countries and so on. But EOSC is definitely a topic that is dealt with in there. Another level of exchange or instrument is the so-called EOSC roundtable that has been established by the NFDI. And in this roundtable, the German members of the EOSC Association meet regularly. So I'd say it's 2 or 3 times a year. And just for your information, in the NFDI, Germany is represented with 20 members. There is the NFDI as the mandated organization. Then there are several members with voting rights and observers. And this is important. The focus of this roundtable is exclusively the EOSC. In particular, it's important in this group of discussions to prepare the general assemblies of the EOSC. So normally we meet in advance or right before a general assembly in order to discuss the topics that are on the table for the general assembly and in order to discuss votings that are going to happen and to align or to discuss what we are going to do. And the third instrument I'd like to mention are so-called on-demand expert groups, working groups of NFDI. The participants vary with respect to the topic, and they can be members of the NFDI projects. They can be, for instance, members of the NFDI Senate or other bodies, policymakers, representatives from funders, etc. They are called in on demand. And for instance, in summer last year, a working group has been established for drafting or for developing a position paper with respect to EOSC post 2027. So it depends on the topic. So these exchange formats dealing with the EOSC in Germany exist on different levels. A further connection to the EOSC is via the members from the NFDI consortia who participate in EOSC association task forces. In the last task forces, there were 61 representations from Germany in the task forces. However, this might not be the exact number of the people that are in the NFDI consortia, but there is a great representation from Germany in those task forces. And those task forces deal, for instance, with metadata, data quality, research careers, curricula, technical challenges, and so on. And one observation I'd like to share here is that Germany is underrepresented in infra-EOSC projects. And one possible reason might be that many experts are already involved in NFDI projects. Jörg is giving me a laugh. Okay. And which is good because it's really important to have a very strong connection between NFDI and EOSC, as I'll explain later on. Okay, one important area of action is to work on the alignment between EOSC and NFDI. And this is currently done in different ways, or I'd like to give you some examples. The one is, I'd like to mention BASE for NFDI, so the Union of Consortia, providing basic services for NFDI. And one of the goals here is the networking with European infrastructure landscape, and in particular with the EOSC. And this is the place where connecting points between NFDI and EOSC could be developed. I'm sure there will be more information about the activities from BASE for NFDI later on from the next speaker. Naila Redberg will inform you, I guess, a little bit more about those NFDI projects and what is going on. In the NFDI or within the NFDI, cross-cutting topics that affect several consortia are dealt with in so-called sections, where the members work together to develop cross-consortium standards, metadata standards and formats. And they also deal with internationalization. And this would also include EOSC. And in this regard, the cooperation with EOSC task forces seems to be a very important topic or important action to increase the alignment. And the third point I'd like to mention is the alignment with the EOSC procurement that is necessary. The EOSC procurement is aimed at building and deploying a fully operational infrastructure for EOSC. And this is referred to as the EOSC EU node. And this EOSC EU node consists of 3 lots. You can see it here in the different colors. And those lots have been assigned via a public tender to certain institutions and consortia. And one partner in the one consortium that is involved here is from Germany, and it's the GWDG, the Scientific Compute and Competence Center of the University of Göttingen and the Max Planck Society. And we have a representative here from GWDG today, Sven Bingert, and he'll talk about the FAIR Core for EOSC project. It has been mentioned already, so I guess he'll give you more information on that. With respect to base for NFDI, again, one could assume that lot 1, which is here in green color, so the EOSC platform and services and APIs and web interfaces, might have the most connection points with base for NFDI, for instance, with the topic of identity and access management. Okay, so with the realization of the EOSC, the so-called node concept will be used. And if you remember, the EOSC EU node on the previous slide is one part in the network that you can see here. This is administration of Peter Segedi from DG Connect. So you can see here the reference EOSC EU node, and there should be other nodes in this network that all should be connected to the EOSC EU node. And there should be national nodes, thematic nodes, regional nodes, other data infrastructure nodes, and so on. And one option could be that the NFDI forms one German node. So, for instance, a national node for Germany as one of several nodes, like thematic or regional nodes or whatever. The discussion, maybe you ask yourself, what is a node and what requirements are necessary to establish a node? This is still not clear, so this is currently under discussion. What a node is, what are the requirements, so this is currently not clear. Okay, to finish, I'd like to share another invitation with you, or a save the date, so to say. It's a save the date for the EOSC Symposium 2024, which is going to take place in October in Berlin. It's under the patronage of the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, which I would say shows the importance of the topic. And NFDI is very strongly involved there to foster the alignment activities that are so important to EOSC. So if you want to say, if you want to put it like that, NFDI meets EOSC there, and so please save the date. Come to Berlin, and that was it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Now or later, I will be here until the end of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very nice overview. Do you have questions? Please raise your hands or ask them in the chat. You can also catch them up a bit later if you want to. I don't see currently a hand raised, but maybe more is to come. Okay, so for setting the scene now for the next talk. When I started my job as a director of NFDI, I became the task of increasing the efficiency of the whole German science system. And it really took me 2 nights of sleep to think over how can you increase the efficiency of the whole German science system. And of course, when we started working and get into our goals and missions and tasks, we started to say, okay, let's put the data on the bottom in a picture and let's put the users on top. And in the middle, there's some box of NFDI services or data services. Now, of course, the users want to have access to data and to data services. What do they have to do? In most cases, they will have to authenticate. And that's just a common, because even if data are open and freely available, and even if they are freely downloadable, there's often a good reason for authentication and authorization. And in cases where you have personal sensitive data, or in other scenarios, there might be even legal requirements for doing so. And if you are a researcher by yourself and you did research in your life, then you know that usually in interdisciplinary projects where you're co-working with other partners, it might be tricky to have access to resources in other organizations and getting a login to a server, for example. And so we said, okay, so let's start over there. Let's start at the top and think about it. If authentication and authorization is solved on a national level, and even better, on a European or even a global level, of course, attached with mechanisms and processes to give rights to those people who have a right to access certain services and data. But if all this is in place and I don't have to apply for a profile, so I save the apply forms time, for example, right? This would really increase the whole German science system and even more the international science system. We are not the first ones who are telling so. There are a lot of initiatives, and EduRoam is paving the way. EduGain is following up. But in fact, we said, well, this is a service which is relevant to all NFDI consortia and which is relevant to all scientific disciplines. So shouldn't this be like a base service, a basic service? And we all agreed it's such a good idea. And we quickly identified a number of such basic services that we need. And again, we weren't the only ones. Also in the EOSC and other initiatives, they came to similar conclusions. And we are very happy that we are starting now to work in this area. And today we have here Nalia Redberg from the Base for NFDI consortium, who will tell us, well, what the heck are those guys doing in Base for NFDI and what is the current status and the next steps. Nalia, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everybody, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see my slides? So I'm not Brigitte Matejak. Unfortunately, she is sick today, and so she asked me this morning to step in and give this presentation, but I'm delighted to be here. I have just started on BASE, actually. I've been here a month, so I can tell you what the heck we're up to indeed. I'm based at the University of Dresden. I'm managing BASE for NFDI, and these slides are prepared with my great team, as well as Sandra as well, who I hope is also listening. So I'm going to give you a bit of a kind of, York has very well set the context. I'm going to give you an overview about how this works and how we are transparent in our processes and what kind of services we're going to offer by the end of this initiative. So important to understand about BASE, and that's already been set out very nicely as well by Anna, is that there are discipline consortia of 26 of them in NFDI. The idea is that BASE is collaboratively owned, so to speak. Everyone in these 26 consortia is involved in the BASE consortia. So it's very much a joint participatory initiative. And the goal is really to underpin exactly what York said, to give a kind of general horizontal core services to take off the shoulders of the disciplinary infrastructures and consortia, take the weight off their shoulders and provide these basic services so that they don't have to do it. So the services will be there for use by the NFDI consortia. We're working towards interoperability, indeed, which has been said a number of times with EOSC and other international infrastructures. And importantly, lastly, is it's very much built on the concept that we reuse and bring together the many different institutions and technical infrastructures that are involved in NFDI. And many leading infrastructures are already in the BASE consortia. So it's really about bringing these synergies together at national level. Change my slides. What's the tip here? Yeah. Okay, so a number of times people have mentioned the sections in NFDI. So these colorful circles here, you can see, these are the cross-cutting sections that NFDI engages all their consortia together to come together to discuss in working groups and in these sections, these key components of this open science landscape and research data management and FAIR landscape. So Brigitte, who was meant to be here giving this talk, is responsible with Oliver for the metadata and terminologies, but there's also other sections such as common infrastructures, training, engagement with industry, also important, and ethical and legal social aspects. So the idea is very much that this is where, and this is critical here, that base is bottom up. This is where these conversations take place at national level. And you're all German in this audience, but this is where the needs are recognized, and that groups of projects will come together and will apply and will be given some financial resources to go through this 3-stage process to create over a number of years a service to bring it to operational level. So it's not an operation, it initializes, it integrates, and then it ramps up through a 3-stage process. So it's very much an iterative process. It's a stepwise process. It's transparent and important, and I'll explain in a bit. It gets buy-in from the NFDI consortia as a whole during every step. And the consensus is built into the whole process. So it's actually a very fair process from a top level. Okay, so what is a basic service? I mean, Jörg has said, indeed, authentication is a critical service, but there are more, and there will be more, and we have 3 examples. We're hoping to see more of these. In general, it's very much could be a technical service, so the classic kind of core components that we've seen in EOSC, from the EOSC core as well, storage, computing. It could be software, it could be processes, it could be anything that derives from the needs of the sections, even something like a service desk or training, research data management, those kinds of things. It has to have a certain element of technical component. But importantly, it adds value for the users, and it's bringing together existing services, and it's working towards being sustainable. So what we support is not the operational, but really kind of building up the service to bring it to the operational stage, and to identify what the KPIs are and how to make it sustainable in the long term across the NFDI. So in short, how we see BASE and how I've interpreted it is that it's really a framework, and we're kind of understanding what the processes are to build this user-driven infrastructure and framework for the NFDI. But we're working along an agile process and in the stepwise, in these 3 different steps. And building on these existing solutions, and in the work plan of the projects is also about interoperability and how they can expose and make components of their services or deliver services within the EOS framework as well. And we have 3 services here. I'll just touch on them. Identity and access management. Indeed, as was said, some consortia and NFDI may not have any solutions available, and will find this, will be using this when it's become operational as a core service across the consortia. Some it's maybe more separated across these different communities, and the idea is to try to understand how we can bring these together and roll out communities of IAM and AAI. And it could well be a component of EOSC. We have to still see, as was mentioned, the EU node, and the procurement has just started. These conversations have just started, how we can integrate and what maybe parts of this component could plug into the wider EOSC landscape here. And if, if we're national EOSC node, this could also be our in-kind contribution. We have to have these discussions. Of course, there are challenges because Germany is a federated system. It's a very large country, and all these many different components will have to be brought together, and there have to be agreements and governance models as well as this service develops. So this service is in the middle stage. It's in the integration stage already. So it's already done initialization, building needs requirements among the community, and now it's in the 2nd stage for a year or so. PIDs, very happy to say this project is an initialization stage. It's doing, kind of trying to scope the NFDI landscape in terms of, discoverability of metadata, different kind of schemas, seeing how needs requirements are for the PID. It's in the initialization stage. There is, we're working closely with the German network, PID network that's in place, but the idea is to roll this out as a central component for FAIR in the NFDI. Again, this could also be a component for the EOSC, or parts of the components, the technical components could be part of the contribution to EOSC. So watch that. And then thirdly, we have terminology services. a highly technical project which has just started an initialization phase, and anyone who's familiar with terminologies will know that there are many, many, many different terminologies, and this is crucial for data-driven science across the many consortia, and this is about aligning these, bringing these together to see how we could make a horizontal approach to delivering this. So they're really kind of reaching out to many different consortia and seeing what's out there, and it's an excellent team trying to converge all these different elements together in the terminology landscape in Germany. Just a bit about the decision-making process, because I think this is very crucial, and I think it's a very transparent part of BASE, and there is something called the Technical Expert Committee, and they will assess each of the proposals as they come in, and they have to reach a certain criteria, and it's a very thorough, high standard that they're being assessed. Excellent people on the tech itself. They will give a recommendation, and it is the NFDI consortia who will sign off on that and say yes or no, we actually would like to have this service in initialization, or yeah, let's carry this on to integration stage, or okay, this is proved to be really useful, we would like to have this and ramp this up and give it more support and take it up into a fully functioning operational service. You'll see tool pool there. This hasn't happened yet, but it may be that if it doesn't get through and get signed off by the consortia, it could still be given resources to expand as a smaller service or a vital tool for some consortia. So we've got up to stage 2. We're very much starting stage 2, and in a year or so we'll be able to get to stage 3 and see what happens. And also about transparency, you see there that these 3 different stages have sign off from the consortia, so it's 25%. They have to have approval from the different consortia for the initialization. Then it gets more intense, has to be 50%, and then for the ramping up, it's 75% of approval, and that will take you to TRL 7 and 8, and then through the third stage, then they'll have to prove the service that it can be sustainable. Again, the funds are not for operational stage, that's more for development. But then it'll get through to a TRL 9 stage, and then that's what we could actually call a basic service for NFDI. So this is it's taking its time, and it's a very thorough and a very consensus-driven process, which I think is an excellent example for many other countries or regions developing open science services. I just want to touch a little bit on this, and I think this is important for the work of impact as well. A lot of the projects that are working on these services are very busy. They have a lot on their shoulders doing other things in their day jobs. So the BASE core team, we're expanding the team, and we have this whole concept of support in a way, and knowledge and understanding built into 2 strands: the section liaison officers and the service stewards. So the section liaison officers are really there to be supportive to the sections, and to understand the landscape, to understand the consortia, and to understand in the different stages of the services, what are the decision-making processes, and to see opportunities for basic service development, and have their ears to the ground to really understand what is happening. And that's an excellent support in a way to the sections. And then the service stewards as well. We have kickstarted this project, and they will be really, it's a nice idea because they're accompanying the services through their life cycle. So we're really at the very beginning stages. They're not allowed to write the proposals. They can guide and assist with their technical knowledge. They have technical knowledge in different areas. And they're really kind of engaging the community as we go along to see the user requirements and to really make that interplay among the consortia and the partners to make the service success, and to help at the different development stages and give that feedback, and also to help with these we will encounter governance issues, agreements issues, all these kind of interoperability issues as the services gel and come together as one, so to speak, to become operational. And I just thought I'd put their faces there. We're nearly full. We've got all of them apart from 2, and they're based in different institutions across Germany. So I think soon the website we'll have them up listed on our base site, and you can take a look at them. And if you're preparing a service in your section, you can certainly reach out to them and the section liaisons, and they will be there to, you know, to support the services as they go through their journey of 3 stages. And I think I'm at the end. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm sorry I'm not Brigitte, but I think FAIR Impact is great. I'm very happy to see my colleagues at FAIR Impact, and I think that one of the interesting questions will be is how do we make these interoperability agreements and decision-making processes as the consortia come together to make an operational service, and what are the institutional agreements. And that's where I'll be watching FAIR Impact, and because I know they have a work package in that area, and so let's work together and keep in touch in what we're doing. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Naila, for a very good presentation and overview, and thanks for jumping in for Brigitte on a shorthand notice. Are there any questions from the audience? You might as well contact her directly, of course, or even us. Stefan Janosch,
yes, I have one. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. How important is the community management of a service? Let's say 90% of all users are not digitally literate enough, and all of these people need help using the service. I mean, a basic service like identity, also IAM, hopefully doesn't need help, but there might be more services. And usually what I see out there is not enough resources available, speaking of manpower, which help people getting along with all the digital infrastructure.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I can answer that in the sense that we have a dedicated, I should have said in the office, we have a dedicated training manager who will keep abreast of training, helping to design training materials for each service. So there's that, so that's support. Then the service stewards themselves, I see, will also be engaging the community and will hopefully head towards communities of practice for each different service, because these take years to build, I think, and this is a constant back and forth and tweaking, and you know, it's a dedicated effort. So I hope they will have capacity to do that, and that would be our contribution in terms of community support. But it's an ongoing effort, and I hope that they'll be supportive to the NFDI consortia as well to do this kind of outreach. And the consortia will also, I think, will have to come to an agreement with the consortia that they can also provide some dedicated manpower to engaging their disciplinary communities to use the service. But thanks for the question, and it's a good point.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's right at the center of how do we actually maintain over time, and how do we keep up the interest, and how do we keep the information cycle up and running. So thank you very much for both of you for asking the question and answering them. And now it's time to move over. So in Germany, there's a huge project called Gaia X. It's an international project. In the meantime, I think it started more or less in Germany, but I'm not 100% sure. But this is a large-scale endeavor where everything is about data spaces. And the question is, how can we come up with a technical infrastructure with standards and everything for these data spaces? And very early when we started in NFDI, it became clear we have to find synergies between NFDI and the Gaia X project. And so we started engaging with partners from Gaia X and came to the conclusion we needed a joint project. And I'm very glad that Daniela Mockler is here for today, because she's the project lead at NFDI for the FAIR Dataspaces project. Daniela, the floor is yours. Daniela, you're still muted. Sorry.
Thank you for the introduction. Perfect. It was a two-step mute here, not two-step authentication, luckily. So thank you for having me here today to give an overview of the FAIR Dataspaces project. I'm a scientific officer at NFDI, but also the work package lead for road mapping and community building in the project FAIR Dataspaces. And first, to set the scene real quickly, we've already heard about NFDI in the previous talks. And as we know, data nowadays is constantly generated, so there's not really a lack of data. However, there's probably here and there a lack of knowledge about where we can find the data that is interesting to our work as researchers. And this is because data is usually stored decentrally, possibly only temporarily as part of a project lifetime. And even if I then have found the data set that interests me and I can even access it, I might not know afterwards, after accessing it, what is exactly behind the data, because maybe like the metadata is a bit lacking there. So I'm not quite sure how to incorporate the data set into my work due to that. And also, I might be wondering how trustworthy is the data source that I have in front of me. So these points of data linkage are really like a challenge within your own research domain, as we know already. And further challenges arise when you then want to exchange data beyond your own domain boundaries. But these challenges are there to be tackled. So with this in mind, as Jörg said, FAIR Dataspaces came about. So let's quickly go back a couple of years. In 2019, the French and the German ministries for economics initialized the project Gaia-X to enable data sharing in a trusted environment. So as we heard already, Gaia-X is an EU-initiated project, and it's bringing together stakeholders, mostly from industry, but also from science, and ideally also from the administration and public side, to work together on the different data spaces. So the goal here is to create an open and transparent, but also a secure federated data infrastructure. And Gaia-X does it by connecting different platforms that provide data or services. And these platforms are then due to follow a common standard that is aligning with the EU values. So it is creating not like the European cloud that was often like found on the internet, but it's more creating a digital governance based on the European values to obtain these values as transparency, interoperability, and sovereignty across the data and the services that are available within this ecosystem. So Gaia-X is more like an industry-oriented data infrastructure, I'd say. On the other hand, in 2018, the establishment of a national research data infrastructure in Germany, short NFDI as we know it, was agreed upon with the adoption of the so-called Bund-Länder-Vereinbarung, Federal State Agreement in English, and NFDI is more of a research-oriented data infrastructure. So we heard already about that, so I'm going really quickly over that. So we want to promote with NFDI science and research throughout a national research data infrastructure. So establish and further develop an overarching research data management to make the existing data accessible and broadly usable. So as Jörg said, therefore to then increase the efficiency of actually the entire research system. So it's a bottom-up process, as we also heard before, with a broad coverage of the scientific landscape, and it's user-driven and demand-oriented. And this is also why we are having these 26 consortia whose aim is to then improve and safeguard access to data as well as the use of data in their respective research field. But then they also, as we heard with BASE for NFDI, and we heard about the sections, they're also tackling cross-consortia and interdisciplinary topics. As we just heard. So the overarching motto is, so to say, to make the research data or data within that ecosystem fair. So then the project FAIR Dataspaces came to life, which is aiming at connecting the two domains of science and industry by linking these two initiatives, Gaia-X and NFDI. So let's have a look at FAIR DS in short at a glance. So FAIR DS actually started already back in May 2021, and we are now in our last project year, actually. There are 16 participating institutions that are spread across whole Germany that are participating, and one of them is being NFDI. The majority of the institutions are from research domains, and the funding comes from the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. So the goal is to create a data space for industry and science, or depending how you define a data space, actually, if you look at this like 3-year project, 3.5-year project, it's to create building blocks for these data spaces. And in order to do that, there are certain things that have to be looked at. For example, it's necessary to clarify legal and ethical issues that might arise in the two domains individually, but also when you bring these two domains together then. And then we also need, of course, the technical foundation for these building blocks to then, in the end, demonstrate a sovereign data exchange between these two domains. And what goes along with this is the community building aspects, not only within the project, because as said, the 16 participating institutions are spread across Germany, but also beyond the project. That's why we are also observing the developments on the European level. So for example, in EOSC, we have overlapping staff, that is people who are not only active in the project, but they are also active in EOSC. So how does it look like? The 16 participating institutions are organized in 5 work packages, which tackle the goals that we just heard about. And these 5 work packages are roadmap and community. So that is the community aspect where I'm from. Then we have the ethics and law work package that is looking at a general analysis of the questions that arise when these two domains are meeting, but they are also looking at our demonstrators or use cases, if you like, and look what kind of law or ethical issues could arise there and which laws might be applicable in which situation or usage. Then there's the technical foundation that creates reference architecture where the demonstrators are integrated. And then the demonstrators itself, I will come to them just on the next slide. They are then showcasing how to use data from the two domains in more concrete applications. So if we look at our demonstrators that we can also call use cases, we have actually 3 currently in FAIR Dataspaces. And these demonstrators are built upon developments actually made in the NFDI consortia, and then they're being developed further now within the context of the project. So the goal is to make them Gaia-X compatible by adding, for example, a Gaia-X conform self-description. This first demonstrator is the so-called biodiversity demonstrator. It is based on the Geo Engine, which is a platform with a web-based user interface and a portal where you can explore and also visualize and analyze biodiversity data. And this data comes in various data formats, so that's the challenge, and there are different data acquisition methods to get it. So on the one hand, you might have vector data, for example, for trees, what kind of tree type is standing at what coordinate and when was it recorded, and on the other hand, you can overlay, if you have that, a satellite data of that region where you have the data about the trees. So one application for that demonstrator could be looking at the health of a tree population. For example, one could look at the health of a city park with trees. That has, on the one side, a societal benefit because it increases the livability of a city for the people there. But you could also see an economic benefit because through increased livability of a city, it also contributes to the tourism. And if it's more like of a state forest, the forestry office, they have some business interest on keeping their forest healthy because they want to at some point chop up the trees and sell it probably. So more details, I'm sure the slides will be made available afterwards. And I linked a little video here for the individual demonstrators that we did within the scope of a workshop. So if you want to know more about the technical side of the demonstrators, feel free to visit that. It's on our FAIR Synodal community. And we try to also rate the current demonstrator state with the respect to the FAIR principles. So we are overall, I think, in a good state. We could, for example, here with the F and the A value for this demonstrator, maybe extend a bit more. For example, there's not yet a search function for the data sets that are available within the DO engine, but it's planned. It's just not yet available. And for the accessibility, well, if you, for example, there is the option to use external data from external providers, but then the description of the metadata is there, the responsibility so far of the external provider. So there is no guarantee that you can then integrate it and reuse it or access it, in a nice way that you wanted to imagine. So the second demonstrator that we have is on data quality assurance. So this is, for example, if you look at different field crops and you're asking the farmers to make notes, make a survey about their condition of their crops, what kind of crop they are planting, because you want to ensure the quality there. Then you have a lot of different farmers contributing. And it could be that they are on one day adding a data format that is not within your prescribed or described data schema that you require the data to be. So this demonstrator is running, for example, once a day, whatever frequency you give it, and it's just assuring that the data schemas are met. And if not, you will get a warning early on, and not just whenever the survey is then finished. And a year later from now, you're looking at the data and you're actually realizing there was a mismatch in the columns or something else. And then it makes it more cumbersome to use the data and clean the data later. And the third demonstrator, to speed up a bit, is a cross-platform data analysis. So this is our so-called personal health train, because you can think about train analogy where the scientist is submitting an analysis that he or she wants to do on sensitive health data. So for example, the data normally stays at the hospital. Could be also there are some public available data where you can sign up for a platform and then get access to these sensitive data sets. So the scientist is submitting their analysis in a container, ships it to the central service. So that's the little train. And then it goes further to the individual so-called stations. So for example, the hospital, and that station then checks if the analysis can be run on that hospital. Further in the central system, it will be checked if there's, for example, a certain cancer type that you are interested as the scientist, and if so, the station one pulls it. But then there are some mechanisms in place that are still saying well, maybe this analysis is not complying to all the privacy requests or that requirements that we have. So we are not allowing that analysis to run on our station actually. And then a train that analysis runs from station to station and is just accumulating, for example, the information about a certain cancer that is there without showing any kind of patient data or showing it to you as a scientist. You can't tell anymore how many patients were in hospital A versus in hospital B. So these are our three demonstrators, and they are then looked at and consulted by our ethical and legal team that we have. So the legal team is looking at IP law, secrecy law, copyright law, patent law. And then, for example, especially with the personal health train, there are the experts that are looking at the data privacy laws when it comes to this kind of cross-platform analysis. So currently, we are doing a legal analysis of use cases or of our demonstrators to really follow up the data flow within the demonstrators. Also, when the goal is then to combine these 3 demonstrators later on, so they interact with each other, and then it's important to know what can be done on a legal side and what should not be done. On the other hand, we also have an ethical team who's mainly focusing on informed consent for the use of personal data. So I have a link here to some example consent forms that they created, and you can also look that up on Zenodo if you are interested. So within our last project years, there will be for sure more publications on these topics, so stay tuned and follow our FAIR community over at Zenodo. One last part of our demonstrators, so to say, is an ELSA training curriculum for data scientists that is also being developed within the project. So it started with a landscape analysis, what is out there at currently available university curricula on these topics, and also what kind of guidelines are there for AI. And the curriculum goals themselves are raising, first of all, awareness for these issues that are popping up when you as a data scientist are working in this field. Also establishing a common language when you're then communicating with domain experts. And the ultimate goal would be to integrate the ELSA curriculum and sensitivity into the data science workflow. There's actually, since end of last year, a first version available, and it's also on the FAIR Zenodo community, and it also looks at the 3 demonstrators within FAIR as use cases for this curriculum. And before I end, I would like to also pique your interest in the open call that we have starting in spring, most likely this year. And this open call, we would like to interest further participants to develop further scenarios of data exchange, ideally between industry and science, so-called our demonstrators, and either partially reuse the demonstrators from our project or also come up with their own ideas. So if you are interested in this, you could contact me. I will forward all the information then and make contact with our respective data managers that are handling the open call. But yeah, if you're interested in any of the other content I was showing briefly, stay in touch and subscribe to the newsletter or have a look at our Zenodo community or follow us on the various social media links. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniela, for this very nice overview and showing how Gaia X, NFDI are interrelated, but also showing how this links to other initiatives and topics that we are dealing with. Do you have any questions? Yes, Naila.
Yeah, I have a thank you very much. I thought that was really fascinating. My question is about the F in FAIR and how scalable, how easy have you found it for discoverability across these different communities? You know, is it easy to, just starting with the F, for example, do you all speak the common language in terms of finding discoverability of data sets?
I think there's still room for clarification there. For example, even when collaborating with the Gaia X side, Gaia X itself is very vast. There are a lot of projects. So also there, addressing the topic of self-descriptions, for example, sometimes the project had to already go a step forward before Gaia X was declaring any kind of self-description. So we would describe our data or services already. So I think there's room for improvement, but it's a challenge, and it comes down to communication in the end with the various communities that are out there.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question and for the answer. So we just had the F. Now we are moving back to the I in FAIR, the interoperability. It's a great pleasure to welcome Olivier Rochon from CNRS, who is also a FAIR Impact partner. And he will talk about interoperability beyond the EOSC. So this is, again, the I in the FAIR principles. Olivier, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jörg. So Yeah, I'm Olivier Rochon. I'm working at CNRS, one of the largest French research performance organization. I'm also in FAIR Impact in a work package that deals with interoperability from a legal and organizational standpoint, but also beyond the EOSC. And I'll try to start from what Daniela just presented and bring it a little bit further at the European level, but also outside the research domain. So I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, okay, great. So let's start with a quick definition of what a European Common Data Space is. This is a definition I took from the Data Spaces Support Center, and I'll come back to what that DSSC is later on. So basically, a data space is a federated data ecosystem which has its own policies and rules which can be shared within the data space, but also outside the data space. The users of these data space can access data in a secure, transparent, trusted, and easy way. But in the meantime, the data owners can control the access policies that they want to apply to their data. Having something that is open doesn't mean that it's accessible all the time and in any condition. It cannot be free. It can be under embargo and things like that. But these rules need to be transparently available. So from a technical perspective, we could say that a data space is a federation of distributed data stores, really, with services sitting on the top of that. So that's a general definition. And if we take that to the EOSC, we could have another questions on what the EOSC is really. It's a process. It's a federation of infrastructures. I just mentioned that, and it's an evolving ecosystem. The EOSC is started something like 4 or 5 years ago. It's getting more and more mature, but it's still a moving target in the way that you've seen in the presentation from Anna, that we have introduced some new concepts, for example, nodes. The concept of nodes, national nodes, EOSC node, thematic nodes were not mentioned in the early stages of the EOSC, and we have to deal with that now. So we will focus on the second item, that is to say the federation of infrastructure, and I'll try to give you a quick overview of what the EOSC architecture is. It's an aggregation of different slides, if I can say. The core being core services that will enable the federation. So these core services are, for example, the single sign-on, the knowledge graph, the monitoring, the accounting, the help desk, all those core services that you need if you want to federate data and build some new services on top of that. So in the EOSC, you have an EOSC marketplace, which gathers different type of resources, such as services, software, publications, and data. The services are really bound to the EOSC itself, whereas software, publication, and data come from the data federation. That is to say that they are harvested and made available on the marketplace. So basically, the federated data layer is really an aggregation of data resources provided by research infrastructure or science clusters, initially to their respective community, but that you want to aggregate between themselves. And to do that kind of aggregation, you have the EOSC exchange, where you will have some horizontal services for end users, where you will be able to discover, share, transfer data, right? So that's pretty much the EOSC architecture, and you can see a blue box inside the EOSC core level that's called Simple. Simple is a new middleware that's been that will be put in place by the European Commission, which is supposed to be the glue between the data space themselves, right? So that will be what enables exchange from the EOSC with the other data spaces. So how do we implement interoperability within the EOSC in order to have some exchange between these different layers, EOSC Exchange, Federated Data, EOSC Core? We have a document called the EOSC Interoperability Web Framework, which now dates back to 2021. So that's something like nearly 3 years ago. And it provides recommendation on interoperability from 4 different points of view, legal, organizational, but also, and maybe more importantly, the semantic and the technical side of things. It doesn't impose an implementation of these interoperability requirements, but it says that this should be done. So it's really recommendations. It doesn't say how to do it, right? And for that reason, it's been reworked a couple of times. The last one being quite recent, that was back in October, to see where are the strengths and weaknesses of this framework and try to address them. So that's how interoperability is implemented within the EOSC. So how do we go outside or beyond the EOSC, and what have we got? We've got many different European common data spaces that we could compare to the EOSC, and these are sectorial. That means that they address a specific point of view. So you've got 10 data spaces on that list, but the list is already outdated because we have now up to 15 different data spaces, and there are 5 missing on these slides. These are smart cities data space, tourism data space, language, media, and cultural heritage. So as you can see, some of them are really close to the research domain, and some of them are very dedicated to the private sector, such as the industrial and manufacturing data space. The idea of the data spaces is to rely on a common technical infrastructure and enable data exchange between themselves. That means that there needs to be awareness about the different governance models, business models, etc., etc. So this is what we are trying to address in the deployment of the data spaces. So you have those 10 to 15 data spaces, and you have on another end, you have the technical infrastructure that the European Commission is trying to put together through procurements or funding programs. And in the middle, you've got that data space support center, which is supposed to coordinate and enable the deployment of the data spaces and using that simple smart middleware software. So the Data Spaces Support Center is an EU-funded project that started in April or May or something like that last year. It's coordinated by the Big Data Value Association and the International Data Spaces Association with the close help of GaiaX. So there we go. That's an initiative that's been mentioned before. And the idea is to create a network of stakeholders, identify the common requirements between the different data spaces, and suggest another interoperability framework that the Dataspaces will be able to build on. In order to achieve that, we need a platform to exchange the knowledge that we have on the subject matter experts. So we have split the DSSC has split the work in different working groups, which gather people from the community of practice, the strategic stakeholder forum, and also project from collaborations and the liaisons group. The DSSC has invited 4 EOSC-related projects to contribute to these working groups. We have EOSC Future, we've got FAIR Impact, that's ourselves, we've got World FAIR and the FAIR Call for EOSC. The objective is to share knowledge because all the data spaces are at different levels of deployment. The EOSC with the 5 years of existence is probably the most mature of them. So they've got a lot to learn from us, but we also have interesting stuff to learn from the one in the private sector as well. So we've got 3 different thematic groups, one on the business models, one on the governance, and one on the technology. The technology being technical interoperability. There are a few deliverables in that project. So a blueprint, which will be guidelines to support the implementation, the equivalent of what we have in the EOSC interoperability framework. And all these should constitute the building blocks that I think Daniela referred to earlier in our presentation. So that's what this should look like. We are still in the early stages of that the Dataspaces Support Center. The first meetings of the working group started in May. We already had something like 7 or 8 meetings per working group. So that's quite a significant number. But the first deliverables are due by spring this year. And the project is due to last 3 years. That will take us to 2026, I think. If you want to have more information on the data spaces at the European level, there's been a very interesting study that's been published in December, in which you will have a description of the 15 data spaces of the Dataspace Support Center. So I encourage you to have a look at that. And with this slide, I think I'm good.
Thank you, Olivier, for the very good overview on the creation of interoperability beyond EOSC. Do you have questions from the audience? This currently does not seem to be the case, which gives us the opportunity to move forward to the next presentation. Now we are coming to a topic which is FAIR assessment. And assessing FAIR repositories is one thing that one of the main authors of the FAIR paper, Mark Wilkinson, highlighted in his keynote in last year's Quality conference. And he gave a deep insight on what are the FAIR principles and why is it so difficult to assess fairness of data, but also why is it so important to do that. And so I think it's very good that we have initiatives that go towards these directions. And the FAIR Impact Project, again, also makes an impact here in this area. And we have Robert Hubert and Robert Ulrich from Pangaea and from the KIT to show us how to expose trustworthy information from thematic repositories. Please, Robert. And Robert, the floor is yours. Slides are coming up.
So can you see my slides? And
yes.
Can you hear me well?
Hi, Robert. Everything looks fine.
This is great. Robert, I hope you are with me. So yes, Today, we want to give insights on the work being done in FAIR Impact, especially regarding the exposure of repository information with regard to trustworthiness and assessment. The talk will be divided into two parts. First, I will give a high-level introduction into the concepts and the plans that we have, and then Robert will take over and give specific and concrete examples what this means and how this could be implemented in the real world, so that we are not only talking about concepts, but also about how to roll things out and to bring the concepts into something that impacts the work that we are all doing. So with that short introduction to us, so Robert Huber is from the University of Bremen. He is working with Pangea and responsible for the Fuji tool. He might introduce himself a little bit later. And myself, I'm Robert Ulrich, working at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and I'm part of the team here that is operating the registry of research data repositories.
So before you start, there are comments in the chat, which I can also reproduce. So there are two black boxes in the presentation. So maybe by switching between the Zoom windows or try different thing or just restart it. The first box disappeared. Very good. Now there's one box left.
Oh, this is
interesting. Okay, now the second box disappeared. Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah,
now
I'm just using a simple window manager.
And thanks for spotting it.
Yeah. So yeah, first we are speaking here on behalf of the Work Package 5, specifically Task 5.4. We are working there on guidelines for repositories, registries, and similar or related metadata and data services. So these guidelines are already in the initial version published within the FAIR Impact project. So have a look at the milestone 5.2. And these guidelines will focus on mechanisms to connect all those entities, the repositories, the registries, and discovery portals, with the trustworthy measures like core trust seal or FAIR object assessments like Fuji. And I'd like to highlight here that we will not be limited to specific services, as the aim is to enable seamless discovery in different contexts, and may it be generic or subject-specific ones, but there might be different tools that might use the same information in different contexts. So with that, there had been just examples. So one core difficulty is that trustworthiness is really difficult to grasp, and we want to focus therefore on transparency and standards. A major part in the concept is to foster transparency on the entity level, meaning that the exposure of data should be open, if possible, at the source of its origin, so self-describing and following standards and community recommendations. This includes especially RDA outputs regarding fairness assessment, repositories, metadata, and so on. But we also recommend the use of semantic web technologies like RDF, especially DCAT, as it is the minimal common ground that is quite mature and well adapted already in different scenarios, like open data portals, or the OGC is currently adopting DCAT to the geo standards and something like that. And with the transparency and standards, we are also fostering the exposure towards evidence and assessment. So to build trust, the exposure of information should be backed with evidence. Those following basic principles to back up claims with proof. To give an example, if a repository claims to mint DOIs via DataSite, for example, it shall just give an example that resolves via DataSite to one of the datasets in the repository. So users as well as assessment tools can verify the claim just by resolving the DOI and getting back to the repository. So with the evidence, everyone else can decide on its own if he trusts the information that is provided. And with the transparency and the evidence delivered, there is also another core part of the concept that we don't want to reinvent the wheel and build another platform that connects everything required, but we want to make use of the existing services and just link them together. So this allows services building up on the linkage and to discover further information as needed and provide further insights depending on the context. So, for example, for the FAIR assessment tool, it could query the repository to get certification information and then follow the link to the certification authority to retrieve further information that is more specific, for example, regarding long-term preservation. So it's not that we want to reinvent everything, but we want to connect the stuff in that way that other ones can crawl the amount of data that they need for their specific use case. And this also allows to get from high-level aggregators like registries down to the repositories and even to the digital object level, where there could be more subject-specific information provided than this is possible in a generic registry. And alongside, we are not only producing paper and some guidelines, we also want to bring the guidelines and assumptions into the real world. And this will be done via a small prototype. And this is just to collect feedback ideas from the community to refine the guidelines together with all the participants and to riddle out all the issues that we might brought into the first versions and to get a mature guideline that is published by the end of the project. And with that, we will start with the services, tools, and partners within the FAIR Impact project, but it's planned to expand the scope during the duration. And so we're looking forward to welcome you and contribute to our outputs and bring this in the really good shape. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Robert, who will now give a little bit more detailed insights into the proposed solutions. And Robert, just give me a short note when I should switch the slides.
Okay, I just can take over the screen. Maybe that's easier. So I hope you can see it now. Yeah, so just a short introduction by exposing repository information matters. So here are two examples of Google searches. One is here on the left side is a search for pizza or pizzeria, where Google gives you a wonderful overview of, gives you a definition of pizza, some recipes, and most important, Google gives you a map and an indication where you easily can find a place to actually eat pizza, pizzeria, restaurant, and so on. In contrary, you see on the right side, when someone's searching for data or data repository, so then you also get a nice information or a definition of what data actually is, a dictionary entry, and so on. But to actually find a data repository or find a data set, you have to scroll down very far down. So the reason for this is that here data repositories are really doing a bad job in exposing information about themselves. So here is, for example, an overview of how repositories which are listed in re3 data are indicating or categorizing themselves. So you can see that most of them don't do it at all. And if they indicate a content type or something, so most of the time they indicate that this is a website and web page. This is not wrong, but of course, I would also like to know that information about data or data repository is given on that web page. And this would make it then possible for search engines, for machines to link to this information if humans are looking for that. So we were thinking about how to improve that in FAIR Impact, and I show you some practical solutions, how to expose information about the repository itself, its services, and then I'm going to show something about how to link, for example, FAIR assessment results to the repository or data sets back, so you can indicate that you have been tested or awarded. So first about the repository identity and repository metadata. First of all, it's not really trivial to indicate a type because the most prominent standards don't allow to indicate a data repository. So here we follow the European Commission DCAT AP standard definition for catalog, which actually takes a catalog or repository as synonyms. This makes it a bit easier for us. And in practical terms, it is possible to indicate that information simply by using Dublin core tags, for example, here indicating the type as DCAT catalog, and then the job is done. And you can, of course, use Dublin core meta tags also to give more information about the repositories, like the name, the description, and so on. Another option, and this is what Robert already mentions, is that we are focusing a bit on DCAT, is to give the information in DCAT, and DCAT provides a dedicated class for that. That's DCAT catalog. I mentioned that already, and here the class has some properties which allows you to give a very rich information about a repository itself. And you have to do that as RDF, or likewise, if you're an expert, you can also try to do that in RDFA and embed this in web pages. But it's much easier to use an emerging convention. That's the signposting convention, which is based again on web standards like type links here. Here is an example how such RDF files, DCAT files can be linked in a web page just by using this link tag. The describe by relation indicates that some metadata will be offered when following that link, and signposting also allows you to indicate the format and the use standard here. And of course, well, I showed this pizza example before. You can use a schema.org. Schema.org dataset is and schema.org a data catalog are possibilities to indicate here that information about the repository is offered. With respect to services, this is a bit more difficult, which actually is a shame. With schema.org, it's really tricky to do that. It's much easier to do it in DCAT. Here is an example where a DCAT data service is indicated, which can be enclosed in a DCAT well, record about a data catalog or repository. And here in this example, just shows how the standard is indicated with these conforms to link, and the then the well, the endpoint URI of that data service is also given here. In this example, this is a OGC standard catalog for the web standard. Another possibilities is a quite new convention, which is or was introduced by Herbert van der Stamppel, who actually invented here signposting and was one of the inventors of the Open Archives Initiatives protocol. So this is called FAIRicat, and it is again using typed links, and it's offering the possibilities to indicate link sets, which can be serialized in JSON. And in this JSON, you can link here or list here links to web services like what's listed here in the example, Open Archives Initiatives Protocol, and so on. So I will not go deeper in this detail. I would like to invite you to visit the signposting webpage and take a look at FAIRyCAT, because it's a really interesting way to to link services. Well, with respect to FAIR metrics and FAIR assessment results, so this is also one of the tasks Robert already mentioned. We are now thinking of here using a combination of DCAT and the data quality vocabulary. In practice, this looks like that you indicate here a quality measurement within a DCAT dataset record. So this means you can link from a dataset metadata record to a result of a FAIR assessment. And again, also the metric can be also indicated in the data quality vocabulary. So you can actually have a documented reference to what actually has been measured with this quality measurement. This is an example taken from the DCAT homepage, which makes a recommendation how to use it. Yeah, quite weird measurement, but actually it shows how this looks like. If you would replace this with a Fuji assessment, which gives you a numerical score, a percentage, then you can imagine that would be quite easy to actually indicate the result of a FAIR assessment within a DCAT dataset. So in the moment we are trying to implement this, and here at Fuji side, we have finalized the first version to formulate the FAIR metrics, which have been provided by the FAIR project, the predecessor project for FAIR Impact. And this is an example how an assessment actually looks like. Here on the right side, both the assessment result as well as the metrics are serialized as a turtle and are implementing here metrics as well as assessment result in data quality vocabulary. You can take a look at this yourself if you go to the Fuji webpage, perform an assessment, and there you can save an individual assessment. If the assessment is saved, you can just complete the result link with .ttl and take a look at the here data quality vocabulary expressed assessment yourself. So this is going to be improved and discussed within the community. Well, we think it's a nice way to do this, and hopefully it will actually also work in practice. So this is just a short overview on how far we are in the moment. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Robert, and Robert, for giving the overview of the results so far. I think it's a challenging field to really get out the assessments from the repositories and then to make them comparable to each other. And of course, standards are paving the way. Do you have questions in the audience, from the audience? Naila, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question. Would it be feasible to do a FAIR assessment of at service level? For example, metadata records for entry to EOS catalog and things like, elements like that we should take into account designing basic services, and any support we could give them. I don't know if FAIR Impact has any plans in that direction.
Yeah, it would be feasible. In the moment, we just don't have a metric for this, and
Okay.
but which would probably be similar to the metrics we already have for data sets and software and semantic artifacts and so on. So as I just mentioned, the most basic thing is exposing information, basic metadata about the things you are trying to describe and expose, and this can be accessed well quite easily.
Okay, thank you.
Very good question. And maybe something for the to-do list. Thank you. Okay, this gives me the advantage to moving to the next presentation. Thank you for presenting. And I'm now going to introduce Anandi Yapan, I hope I pronounced it correctly, from the EMBL, which is very close to my hometown in Heidelberg. And she's at the same time an EOSC FAIR champion, so championing the provision of FAIR principles. And actually, she's working in one of the it's one of the NFDI consortia, but it's more than that. I know that I'm well aware of that, but you're also participating in NFDI with the GHGA, the German Human Genome Phenome Archive. And this is an incredible life science project, which is ongoing now for some time, which is providing research data to a large scale to better understand how we humans are functioning. I find it quite fascinating. And to make a little spoiler, there's also a podcast which is produced by GH. I'm not sure. Maybe you're also promoting it. I really like to listen to that. It's a really cool podcast. So watch out for that podcast. Anandi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jörg, for such a nice introduction. I hope you can hear me. I'm going to share my screen now. Just let me know if you can see it. Are you able to see my screen? Okay, sorry. So as Jörg mentioned, my name is Anandi Ayappan, and I'm working as a metadata standards officer at EMBL. And I'm associated with this project, the German Human Genome Phenome Archive. And I will be giving a brief overview on the project and also on the work stream that I'm working on. With this, I would like to start with the vision of GHGA, which is enabling genome medicine. So this project started in the year 2020, where the aim was to build a secure national omics data infrastructure that provides a secure platform for data sharing and secondary data use of human genome data from research and clinical sequencing. As Jörg also mentioned, this is part of the German National Research Data Infrastructure, the NFDI. And as we all know, NFDI aims to establish modern research data management for research in all academic disciplines by bringing systematic data management to scientific and research data. GHGA is in specific committed to support researchers from the broader field of biomedical research dealing with human omics data. So the obvious question would be what types of data is handled in GHGA? So GHGA is an archive that is mainly focusing on, or it's actually only focusing on human omics data, which comprises of sequencing, raw data files, associated metadata files, or any type of human omics data. As such, all types of file formats will be supported. This explores on various layers such as the genome, exome, epigenome, transcriptome, etc. And the clinical metadata will be the key, which addresses the phenome aspect of the human data. And of course, since we are dealing with sensitive data, it's extremely important that for all the common data types, they are non-anonymizable. And often we also have high data volumes there in that case. Also, what's very important to know about this particular portal is the access that we provide, because we are also aware of the sensitivity that comes with handling human genomic data. So we provide regulated data access or controlled access in the data portal. So if interesting data sets have been identified by a data user, then the individuals can actually contact the controllers of the contained data sets using the contract information for the data sets data access committee. And then once the access requests are approved by the controller, then the data will be made available via the resources that are outside of GHGA, that is via EGA or other existing infrastructures. That way, we also ensure that we don't take any control over the data, but we just be the mediator between the data user and the data controller. So this consortium has been funded, as I mentioned, since 2020, and is also one of the initial 9 first rounds of the NFDI consortia. And this particular consortium is representing about 10 universities, out of which 6 households and 5 other research institutions. And we also are functioning with different data hubs, which are also co-located with the major academic sequencing centers, such as Tübingen, Kiel, Dresden, Köln, Heidelberg, Munich, and Berlin. So this is also connecting to the national cloud infrastructure, the DENBI cloud. And we have about 15 million funding over 5 years spread. And also there are own contributions by the project or the partner institutions. As you might also know, DKFZ is the coordinating institution, and the rest of us are the coordinating partners of this particular project. Since this project is very ambitious, it involves various work streams that distributes work across and also to ensure that we all come together in a complementary manner. So we have about 8 work streams comprising of the architecture, the data hub, operations and data stewardship, the metadata, of which I am part of, the workflows, the LCT, the training, public and community outreach, and in the end, project management. And we all work closely in complementary with each other, metadata being the key which holds together most of the work streams of the project. To give also a context to the kind of different phases and features that are part of this particular project, we start off with the metadata catalog, which is the first phase of the project, or the first operational phase. Here, basically this particular phase involved the collection of existing national resources, and also we developed standardized data libraries, which are compatible with EGA. And I mean, this was actually the first step that kind of provided the possibility to kind of map EGA data sets with the GHG data portal, kind of establishing the link between the 2 platforms. We are currently in the archive phase. So the archive phase comprises of us being the national EGA functionality. And also we here allow a streamlined data deposition from various data submitters. Also, we are providing central infrastructure for data access committees, and we have a unified ethical legal framework, and also the metadata is harmonized, of which I will be speaking in the upcoming slides. We also have other slides, other phases such as the cloud and, we have the other phases such as cloud and Atlas. The cloud will be comprising of the analytics platform, where it will be possible for users to perform large-scale omics data analysis. And also, we will be having a community-specific data portal where researchers can come together. And the last phase will be the Atlas phase, where we will also provide the possibility of visualization, integration of other modalities, and also statistical analysis as well. I'm trying to move. Okay, so what you see here is the catalog phase. As I mentioned, the first operational phase. This is how the catalog looks like. So we have about, in total, 79 data sets, and the platform also offers the possibility for users to browse data, to access data, to submit data. And also, it's possible for people to learn a little bit more about the metadata model. And also, if you have any specific questions related to GHGA as a project or about the catalog, you are always welcome to look at the FAQ page, where we have basic questions already answered. So jumping on to the core area of my work, which is involving metadata. So here, what we have done is to create a schema, which is also not something that we developed from scratch. Because we have to be compatible with EGA, we have based our model, or the structure or the skeleton of the GHGA metadata model is based on EGA. However, we have also ensured that we are using standardized ontologies and vocabularies to ensure that we cover the FAIR aspects of data sets. This particular schema or metadata model is built using the LinkML framework, which is also a semantic framework that allows us to code standardized terminologies and ontologies. And we also have developed a user documentation to support submission, which involves the different in detailed representation of what fields we have captured, what kind of control vocabularies should be provided. We also provide good examples for users to be, as a guide for users to be able to submit metadata in an easier manner. And also further extension and alignment with other federated EGA nodes and also with the GDI. As I also mentioned, we are very taking strict actions to ensure that all our fields are standardized with ontologies. And for fields which cannot be standardized by ontologies, we provide control vocabularies as a support mechanism that provides a completeness to the model and also addressing the FAIR aspects of the model. What you see on the right side is the schema overview of the metadata model, as I mentioned. It comprises of various elements. The first one being the individual. Individual is nothing but a person who's participating in a study. The next element that we are capturing is the sample, which is nothing but a limited quantity of a biospecimen that is used for testing, analysis, investigation, etc. A sample is prepared from a biospecimen, which is in case an isolate or a tissue. The third element of the metadata model is the experiment, which is nothing but the investigation that consists of coordinated set of actions and observations that generate data with the goal of verifying, falsifying, and establishing the validity of a hypothesis. And the last one is also involving analysis of like research data and process data. Analysis is basically performing experimental protocols on the data sets. Also, each of all of this are kind of tied up by two different modules, which is the study as well as the dataset module. A data set is nothing but a collection of files that are prepared for distribution and is tied to the data access policy and the data access committee. And study is nothing but an experimental investigation of a particular phenomenon, which is involving detailed examination and analysis of a subject to learn more about the phenomenon being studied. We have published a detailed white paper, which describes pretty much in detail about the entire schema. So I have just presented you an overview. Of course, you're free to read the paper and delve into it because it's quite an exhaustive work that we have put together in the last years. So we'll be very happy if you could read it and give us your feedback. And if you have any specific questions related to it, feel free to contact me or my team. The schema, what I showed you in the previous slide was just the abstract, but what you see here is the detailed overview of the schema. So each of the schema is captured in the form of modules. The first one being the basic module, which comprises of publication, study, and study file. The second module is the sequencing module, which captures all the experimental related technical replicates information such as sequencing protocol, the library preparation protocol, etc. The sample module consists of all the sample elements, in which condition the sample was isolated and the files associated with the sample. The next module is the phenotype module, which consists of the biospecimen, individual, and trio classes. The data set module consists of the sequencing input file and the output file, analysis processing files, etc. And the analysis module comprises of the experimental analysis performed, which is provided also as an input and an output. And the dataset module is tied to the data use conditions, which comprises of the data use permission and the policies, the legal aspects of the data. So basically, all the modules that have been presented here can be combined in the combination the user prefers, because not everybody will have all the information that are required from us. So we have designed the model in such a way that the modules can be mixed and matched according to the requirements and the availability of data. But of course, the basic module and the dataset module are pretty much important, or as the basic requirement for submission with us. The rest can be provided according to the user's availability. I think that's pretty much the overview of the metadata model. As I mentioned, I'm just one person representing a huge group of committed team members who have contributed to this project. And I'm very, very happy and proud to be part of this project. And if there are any specific questions related to this, I'll be happy to take it right now. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Anandi, for your very good presentation and overview of GHGA. I actually have a first question by myself, and I dare to ask it directly. Thank you for showing also a first glimpse on the metadata activities, I would say, which is like a teaser. And I was wondering, when I really rethought it, so you did a very thorough analysis of what happens so that the data is created, so from experiments, studies, and you took care of that. And my feeling is that this is quite representative of what is ongoing in life science disciplines in general. So I was wondering if do you have any kind of ambitions to standardize these metadata schemas beyond GHTA?
It's a very, very good question. So right now, GHTA's mission itself is quite ambitious, as I mentioned, because there are a lot of complexities that entails handling human data. So right now, the use cases that we are considering is cancer, genomics, and rare diseases. But definitely, if we are able to at least match the requirements that are needed for these two use cases, then definitely in the future, we will expand to much more broader use case conditions as well. And additionally, to say that we also have the central metadata working group that we have formed recently, just to establish a common model that can be expanded to various use cases in the future. But that's still in a very preparational phase at this point of time. And also as an effort, we are trying to collaborate with different NFDI initiatives, such as NFDI for Health, which is the closest for us at this point of time, where we are trying to align the models and trying to understand what other aspects of health that has been captured, which are probably not part of our model. So this is all in preparation, but I think we have a long way to go to see how we can expand to further use cases in the future. I hope I have answered your question, Jörg.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Are there further questions from the audience? Yes, Martin Golubiewski, please.
Yeah, thank you for this very nice talk. I'm fully agreeing with what was said just before from Jörg, also that we need also this generalized metadata view. And I think probably we even need different layers here. So we need this very specific layer that is addressed in this consortial view, like in GA, or like we do in NFDI for Health, where I'm part of the team. And then we have to put this on a life science layer. So we have to make a kind of an integrative work in a certain domain, greater domain. And then I think what we need, and what also was addressed by Nandi before, is this very generalized view for metadata across the whole domains, like this what is addressed in this section of the whole NFDI that has been formed. And I think we all need these different layers. So I'm happy to see this happening. Actually, that was more a comment, like not really a question. Thank you.
I think your comment is very welcome. So thank you for making it. Okay, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the questions and answering the questions. And we are now heading for the PID meta resolver presented by Sven Bingert from the GWDG. So we at some point of time had PIDs already during this day. And of course, you need some technology so that the resolvement of such PIDs, which are unique identifiers, can happen. And we here see a piece of work that is being done in the FAIR Core for EOSC project. Sven, the floor is yours.
Okay, hopefully you can hear and can see me, or at least see my slides. Perfect. Let's start. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Good thing to be the last speaker of almost last speaker of the day is that you can refer to the old nice and impressive presentations from today. There's a lot of things I couldn't actually refer to, and which I'm looking forward to. I'm happy to be here and to represent somehow a very large project, and so I would already thank all the colleagues of the project who helped to bring this forward and make a successful project. So FAIR Core for EOSC in a nutshell. I think it was maybe already mentioned several times today. Unfortunately, I missed the presentation by Ingrid. So I would call FAIR Core for EOSC as the sister project of FAIR Impact, with a stronger focus on actually implementation part. So the idea was to find the gaps which are identified by the Strategic Research Innovation Agenda by the European Open Science Cloud, and to fill out those gaps with services or core services. That's why it's called FAIR Core for EOSC, and to build those these services. And so it's a quite large project. I would say it's 10 million euros in budget. We have over 22 partners, which I think is very impressive. And if you look at the list of partners on the homepage, you can find a lot of very famous and well-known players in the world of PIDs and data management and so on and so forth. So it's really an interesting project with the focus of doing these core services. We are at the moment in the middle. So we started in June 2022. So we have about 1.5 years left, and I will come to this in a second again. So not completely being independent of community requirements and requests, because we are going to implement core services. You have to, so say, validate and evaluate the requirements and validate if this actually what the community is actually asking for, or do need to have. We have we have set up case studies already in the proposal with this climate change decar set in Germany and so on and so forth, which help us to prove that the services we are going to implement are actually valuable. And besides of that, we are still further ongoing and trying to incorporate or integrate more external communities. So whenever there's a community who's interested in those kind of services, which I'll present in a second, we are actually looking forward to do presentations and do tutorials or workshops on those services for external communities too. Here the list of these core components. As you can see on the top right, there is a little arrow saying the PID meta resolver is the one I would like to present today. As I have only a few minutes here, I cannot talk in detail about all the core services which are listed here. I would very briefly introduce them here in just 1 or 2 sentences, just to raise awareness of those. And you can find all of those services in more detail on our homepage, so faircorefors.eu. And also we have since October the first beta release. So all the services should have at the moment a usable API, UI, and so on to make actually integrate those services in the researchers' own workflows and services and so on. So we have as a core services these large graphs, which is the research discovery graph on the PID graph, which are partly already existing before, that they are becoming an EOS core service. We have something which is called the metadata schema and crosswalk registry. This is very important, as you can think of, that you quite often have to map between different metadata schemas. So this is something which was implemented from scratch from the CSC in Finland. We have something, the typing registry or data type registry, which is very important if you would like to have machine actionable description of attributes or types and schemas. We have also something, because I think we talked about this before today, something like the EOS compliance assessment toolkit. So to figure out if something which is provided actually follows certain compliance. We are happy that we have also RAID on board. So research activity identifier is a new kind of identifier which started this year actually to be more productive also outside of Australia. And we have the software heritage and the mirror of software heritage as part of the FAIR Fairs. Because also there was a slide before by another speaker, I think the question about what is EOS? EOS something under involvement. So then the question, of course, what is EOS core service? What it will be in future? I think this is the answer I cannot give right now. And this is, as the speaker before she said, it's ongoing discussion and movements. And we are also involved in lot 1. There's also lot 2 and 3, and we will see how this actually evolves and where these services actually finally provided and under which label and which form and so on and so forth. But we are still heading forward, and I think these services will actually come in the future. So on the top right, the PID meta resolver is a pick one service for today to explain in detail, but if you're interested in the others, please let me know. We can have a dedicated session on that too. The question is, do we need or do we have a place where we can resolve all persistent identifiers? It's a very strong word to say that we can try to resolve all persistent identifiers. I'm not sure how far we can get, but we try our best to onboard as many identifier systems as possible. But what should you be able to do with such kind of identifier? And if, as you know, you're quite aware of that many identifier systems do give a different answer if you resolve this identifier. Identifier can lead to a landing page or to metadata or sometimes even to a resource. And there's actually different systems, and I will show you a picture next slide, which do provide different features. So provide either landing page or metadata or both and so on. And with this kind of centralized resolver, we might be able to harmonize and standardize a bit the handling of a persistent identifier and the answers you expect from those. What a PID is, I hope we don't have to discuss here anymore. And we know that PIDs are a crucial element of being fair. So, but then there was this question before about what is the F in fair, how you can make it actually fair. I don't have a proper answer here too. So it's really we have to investigate this. But I think one goal is really to add as much metadata as possible to identifier. How this is technically done, it's an open discussion. There's different systems which do this. But again, with the meta resolver, we should be able to access those metadata, which is related to the reference object or to the reference itself. As I said, we should be able to provide kind of information based on the resolving mechanism. So you have an identifier which references anything, a digital object or a non-digital object. And what do we expect to get as an answer? And so we are at the moment, even though we have the beta release still under discussion, to have a final definition on that. What is a landing page? What is metadata and resource? This is also a never-ending story, but we can try to say something like the landing page is a source of metadata, but might be not perfectly machine actionable. Metadata itself is machine actionable, would be provided in standardized formats like XML, JSON, or whatever. And the resource is then the object we are actually interested in. That might be the movie or the measurement from the ocean and so on and so forth. And in ideal case, having an identifier, we might be able to access all of these things at the same time. That would be the ideal case. Not all systems actually provide these features, but that's what we actually try to do. So we would say this is in service, and you can select based on the identifier what kind of answer you would like to have when resolving it. This is an overview of the already onboarded systems or system we have in our roadmap, and there's definitely more systems, and you can see that we have here already DOIs and we have rates, but there's also ROAR as the organization identifier or funders, they have Crossref and so on and so forth. There's quite a lot of interesting, but we're also dealing with ARC, URN and so on, which is basically completely different technical implementation. And what the meta resolver is actually doing, that's what's called the meta resolver, is redirecting to the actually provider resolver. So we are not maintaining or storing any data or metadata by ourselves. We would just include the logic necessary to retrieve the information requested by the user or by the machine. So the requested information could be then the landing page metadata or the resource itself. And so we have to build a service which is scalable, which is able to request different other resolvers from different providers. And this is a challenge, and that's why we need to onboard as many providers as possible. On technical perspective, it's a 3-layer architecture where we have the meta resolver backend on the left-hand side here on the screen, which is based on the Handle software. Handle is well known as the basis for the DOIs, for example. In the middle, we have a meta resolver API and the web UI on the right-hand side. So depending on your requirements, you might either use the UI or the API or even the backend. And in the web UI, you have then the opportunity that you can try out, you can test, you can resolve and do other fancy stuff. You can figure out what kind of identifier I actually do have. You can then select, as you can see here, if you would like to retrieve the landing page metadata and so on, depending on the identifier system you actually do have. This is, of course, not really scalable because if you do integrate the meta resolver in a kind of a scientific workflow, you don't want to use the web UI and copy and paste single identifiers on the UI. You would like to integrate this, and therefore we have the backend, the API, which has a proper technical description for all the developers. It's a Swagger UI-based implementation, where we actually provide endpoints to do exactly the same thing, like validation and testing and resolving of identifiers. On top of that, we have the functionality integrated already that we have in the UI, a new provider of identifiers could actually log in and add a description and maybe also the necessary information how to resolve their own PIDs. So it's a system where providers can actively contribute by logging in and providing necessary information. And if this is done, we just have to make a minor step, and then the new system is actually included on all 3 levels I just showed before. To make the story short, because of time is late today, so we have here, so say, a kind of a possible integration workflow with the focus of FAIR core foils, of course. Yeah, I've shown here the main core components of FAIR core foils. It doesn't have to be Dutch components, but you can just imagine that you replace different items here by your own systems, or you integrate core services in your own workflow if necessary, either the crosswalk registry, the crosswalk registry, or the type registry, and so on. But in principle, it would work like this: that you have in the PID graph, you figure out, or you find a string which is not identified, for example, as a DOI. You would ask the beta resolver, what is it? Ask for the content. In the content, you might find a kind of a typing, so a reference to a machine actionable description of attribute. You would then maybe even look up in the crosswalk registry if you can map it to another metadata schema, and then at the end you can register the content in the PID graph again. So it's a closed system, it looks like, but as I said, you can just take each component individually. Okay, this was already, I think, the presentation, and this was the FAIR core foils in a nutshell, and I hope there's some questions, and if not, I'm happy to give another presentation in another place.
Thank you, Sven. I'm looking forward to another presentation, please. Yeah, thank you very much for this very nice overview. Also showing what kind of basic services FAIR core for EOSC is developing. And actually, I'm really looking forward for things like the meta resolver, the meta PID resolver, because this solves the problem a little bit from the user perspective. Which PID should I choose? Very often people do ask me this kind of question. Which one is better than the other one? And usually I say, well, there are advantages and drawbacks for anything, any kind, but the important thing is a PID, it's a permanent ID. So as long as this is guaranteed, most advantages will be granted. I've seen shortly the hand of Anandi. Did you have a question?
Yes, I mean, actually, you actually asked the question about the PID part, so I didn't want to ask the same question again. But I was just wondering, out of curiosity, because you mentioned about RDF, are there also future plans of integrating existing RDF endpoints to ensure that we expand the knowledge space, or is it going to be very specific with the use cases that you receive? I mean to say, like, various data portals already have public endpoints available, right? So in future, do you plan to have them integrated for federated querying, or that's not thought through?
I'm not sure what you actually refer to. But it's 2 different things. So there's the graph thingy in FAIR core foils where we try to onboard more content, definitely. But I'm not here. So we have to ask the work package leaders of those components to figure out what the next steps actually is. But in principle, yes, we're looking for more and new communities to use our service or to integrate more data in our services, which you're going to provide.
And I was just asking in terms of the density of the content, because some of the knowledge portals already have existing resources which might not be part of your model, but because these endpoints exist, then it adds a layer of additional knowledge to the existing model that you are developing. So that way it helps you to traverse across knowledge spaces. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and I think that we should be quite open with all the data we provide and share. Then we can actually have this crosswalk around different repositories and providers. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Yes, thank you very much. We are quite advanced in our timing. So basically, this more or less was the open discussion. Unless you have important questions to raise as of now, we would have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. But of course, you can also approach people after this workshop. Everybody will be happy to receive your questions. Stefan Janosch, please.
How do I stay informed about EOSC developments and NFDI? All of this overwhelms me, and there is no central resource. Of course, there's social media, and I can follow many people, many accounts. There is the different social media platforms. But do we have a news service which actually keeps us up to date? I actually could need an RDM newspaper where everything is condensed professionally, like a newspaper. Yeah, actually, because there's too much ongoing at the same time, and I'm overwhelmed, honestly.
I know this feeling as well. So there are multiple newsletters, and that is probably part of the problem. In fact, so for German-speaking people, is it also in English? I'm not 100% sure at the moment, but so the newsletter from the Rat für Informationsinfrastrukturen, the RFII, I like it very much because it brings a lot of things to the point, which also goes beyond NFDI and beyond EOSC, but includes it as well. So it's kind of a meta newsletter. But I do subscribe to your point of view that there isn't a resource which is really bringing it to the point and then gives you guidance on where to find next things. It's a good question. But maybe some further people have further good comments on where to find straight to the point information.
I could add that there's the NFDI all mailing list, which provides quite interesting information, mostly on ongoing conference meetings and workshops and so on, which is quite helpful.
Thank you. I mean, there's also the NFDI newsletter, of course, but I guess you are aware of that. And as I said, there's more than one newsletter. So I know this problem. And it's quite overwhelming.
Sorry, I could add the newsletter of the EOSC Association. This is maybe one source where you can find condensed information.
If you really want to start, then RFII, EOSC, NFDI is a good way to start. And from there, you get a lot of different pointers to other repositories.
Yeah, 2 of them I already subscribed, and now I need a newsletter aggregator.
yeah, I see your point. I definitely see your point. We are now in a phase also in NFDI where we brought up the domain initiatives, the consortia, and since they are all running now, it is the time for us now to focus more on the bundling of activities, and that is the sections in particular. And of course, this will also lead to a more condensed view on what we are actually doing in NFDI and related initiatives. So step by step, I think this aggregation will come now, at least for NFDI. Naila Redberg, please.
Yeah, just to say, I suppose things will become a bit clearer when the procurement or the EU node, when there's more clarity on what they will deliver and how this maps to what the national services can deliver as part of the EOSC node. It's still up in the air for many people, and I think hopefully in a year or so we'll be in a better direction and things will start to be a bit clearer how these components fit together, national and European level.
The good thing is we are at the moment fastly moving on different lanes. And events like today should provide guidance on how these lanes start to intersect and lead to common bigger lanes that are jointly going in the right direction. But I think it is really fair to say that we are still in a phase where a lot of these activities at high speed are moving forward. But seeing things like the meta resolver on a technical level, for example, is a great way of bringing bits and pieces together. And the great vision, of course, is that this a user-friendly way of understanding how research data management can be provided, even on a PhD level, for example. So if we achieve that, if our target groups, including researchers, if they understand how this all works, then we reach our goal, and we're working hard on that. Now let us conclude in a final wrap up. And for this, I hand over to Sarah Pitonet.
Thanks a lot, Jörg. Thanks all for staying until the very end of this long, while extremely interesting and very debated and active workshop. So once more we understood that we should never give for granted that there's such a national interest in active communities that always bring new pieces to this great puzzle, I mean, that we try to build. We have started from a broad and wide overview where we are in Europe up to some very contextualized examples brought by our community members for working on implementing open science. So I just conclude by mentioning once more that if you're interested in getting support on something specific at your institute, so that you know that people around you are struggling with or want to learn more, on the 31st of January, the third round of support actions that we are delivering will be launched. We have 5 topics on the plate. So browse the website, the FAIR Impact website. There is an open calls tab. So that's where you will find all the information. For the rest, all the materials of today will be shared in the next days on the event page. We will reach out to you, informing you about this. And thanks once more to all our speakers, to Jörg for his chairing, and to all of you that express your interest in pushing this forward. So bring what you've learned back to you and reach out to us should you need any further support. Thanks a lot.